You always hear it out in kind of the personal development sphere and the spiritual sphere of like, if you really focus on what's important to you, the things you need will come. Like joy will come, material success will come, and you're like, oh God, yeah, whatever. and then it happens and you're like, oh wow, yeah, that makes sense. I think maybe there's an element of time and luck and holding your nerve until that happens. Like that's not going to happen immediately. And I was very fortunate, I think, in this year that a whole load of things collided and allowed me to get to this place where I feel like, yeah, now I'm here. But, that's taken me, I don't know, 15 years from when I from when I left school. So I think it's true. And also patience and grace are needed.
Hey y'all, my name is Jessie Johnson. Welcome to the Success Sessions. I'm super, super honored to have Holiday Phillips here with us today, coming all the way from UK, yeah?
Yeah, London.
I discovered Holiday when I got the call to create space in my social media to amplify melanated voices, and had the experience of not being able to do it like I was trying. And still my feed was just filled with white people. And I was like, okay, I need to take some more proactive action. First of all, that's horrifying to me to realize that that's something that I've allowed to happen. And it was very easy, of course, to find incredible human beings of all shapes, sizes, colors, doing all kinds of amazing things that matter to me. So I felt really humbled. It was an embarrassing kind of like, not my proudest moment, but it brought me to you, Holiday. And as soon as I found your feed, I immediately was like, I want to know this woman. I want to talk to this woman. We tried to schedule this interview actually back in, I think, June. And I feel really grateful. I was thinking about it as we were preparing for this today, that I feel really grateful that we're doing it now. We're recording this in late August, and it feels really important to me. We're still having these conversations. We're still talking about race, success, spirituality, how these things connect. So I just want to thank you again and welcome all of you listening to open your full hearts and receive Holiday's transmission. She's super fucking powerful, brilliant, integrated in all of these conversations. And so I'm really excited to learn from you today, Holiday. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me and for such kind and generous words.
I want to begin by asking you how you defined success when you were a child and how you were wrong.
Oh, that's a great question. So how I defined success when I was a child and how I now know that I was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, let me dig in a little bit for this. I went to a very, very academic school, very competitive, high performing. Both my parents are immigrants to the UK. It was a private school, so a paid for school in the UK. So there was like a lot of pressure on both me and my sister to be high achievers. And I remember my dad saying to me, those were one of the things he would always say to me, you're going to have to work twice as hard because you're a woman, and then another 2 times as hard because you're a Black woman. So I think my definition of success when I was a child, or certainly a teenager, was very much within the framework of successful career, high achieving, compared to other people. And how was I wrong? Entirely, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I spent probably the most of my 20s jumping from career to career, desperately searching for this thing, this career, this purpose, actually, that was going to make me feel whole. And now that I'm in my 30s, I really, well, I don't know what I realized, because I guess we're always still learning, but I think probably the idea that there's an end point of success, that now I no longer believe. Like, okay, if I have this, and this, then I'm going to feel like I've achieved success. Rather seeing life as a series of evolutions, that you're always just widening and growing and moving. So I guess that's the first part when I was wrong. And then, and surely as well, putting all of this focus on career and finding that one thing. I mean, I wouldn't even say that I do so many different things. I never found that one thing. And I think releasing the idea that there was this one thing was a huge liberation for me.
Oh, I love that. I feel like everyone that's listening is just going to breathe this massive sigh of relief hearing that confirmation, because I do think that I hear that a lot, that there's so much struggle around feeling the pressure to choose.
Yeah.
So how, you've sort of spoken to this, but I want to ask you the question directly, how you define success now for yourself first.
So this is actually the one question that I thought, just as I sat down, I thought, I think you'll probably ask me this, so let me have a think about it. And the immediate thing that came to my mind was, for me, success is feeling aligned with my values. And I think that's probably, in terms of like success for different people, maybe that's the closest version of success that I can conceive of for anyone. Because when I think about my values, it's like, what's most important to me and what's really at the core and the root of joy and thriving and abundance and all of these like amazing things that we want. Underneath that, for me, is like, yeah, what do I value? So for me, success is how close am I to that? And then so for my personal, within my personal framework, values like connection and contribution and freedom. Those are like my 3 core values. And I think that probably where I am in my life right now is the most successful I've ever felt and actually been, in terms of like your like hard metrics, materially, all of these things. And when I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm super aligned with my values. Like, I'm so connected with so many people, I'm contributing, and I'm super free in terms of my lifestyle. And that for me is success. And also I think in freedom, there is also financial freedom there as well, like being free to not have that monkey on my back of knowing, do you know what, tomorrow I'm good, next week I'm good.
I love this conversation. You know, I've asked this question so much, but everyone's answer is different, and your answer feels like, again, like nourishment. There is a part of it that I think is relevant and accessible to anyone listening, to shift the measurement from external to internal alignment. And it's also really satisfying to hear you say, like, and I'm doing it. Like, I know that this is success because I'm doing it now and it feels good to me. And P.S., like, these other things are happening also. So it's not a self-sacrifice. It's not like you've prioritized your values at the expense of your material success. In fact, it sounds kind of the opposite, that you've chosen to prioritize your values, and the material things that you need in addition are coming along for the ride.
Yeah, totally. And it's one of those really weird things, like you always hear it out in kind of the personal development sphere and spiritual sphere of like, you know, if you really focus on what's important to you, the things you need will come. Like joy will come, material success will come, and you're like, oh God, yeah, whatever. and then it happens and you're like, oh wow, yeah, that makes sense. I think maybe there's an element of time and luck and holding your nerve until that happens. Like that's not going to happen immediately. And I was very fortunate, I think, in this year that a whole load of things collided and allowed me to get to this place where I feel like, yeah, now I'm here. But, you know, that's taken me, I don't know, 15 years from when I from when I left school. So I think it's true. And also patience and grace are needed.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said, hold your nerve. I've never heard that phrase in this context. And I think that that's right. It's like, there is always a gap. So, sometimes it is very short, but there's always a gap between when we dream, vision, get new clarity about what we want, and the form of it coming into our lives. To know that that's normal, and that in the interim there is a requirement of us. You said, hold your nerve, be patient, let grace be there. That's like the energetics of that, and this is who you are. You're just kind of transmitting the feeling, the vibration of that as you're speaking, is the thing that I see. That everyone that comes to me that's in struggle around it is not doing that, right? Mm-hmm. They're in anxiety, they're stressed out, they're feeling like it's not going to happen, they're in fear, which is also totally understandable, normal. But I love the language that you're giving to this, because it feels very mature, very refined, very accessible. That word keeps coming up. Hold your nerve.
Good.
I love that. Can you tell us a story about a moment when you held your nerve? I'm going to start there. I have a couple stories I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the kind of context for, in terms of, oh gosh, it's across so many different places, isn't it? But I would say, like, in my 20s, I was a serial flip-flopper. I was like always going from one extreme to the other. So I left school and I got a place at Cambridge University, which is like one of the most prestigious ones in the UK. So I went there, I hated it. It was super traditional, really undiverse, very constricting. Dropped out, went traveling around South America. I was like, I'm just going to be a free nomadic traveler. Then I was like, this isn't really working for me. Came back, went and got on a graduate scheme with Apple. Did that for 2 years. Then decided I kind of rejected capitalism and materialism. Went to go and live in Malawi for a year, volunteering on farms. Came back, got a job. I mean, I was consistently in this thing. Locate myself, because we're complex beings, and I just wanted it to be simple. Either I was this free being who didn't care about money and just wanted to follow my spiritual path, or I was this super high achieving person, and I could not work out how the two could coexist. So I just went from one to another over about 10 years. And then I went through, probably about 7 years. Then I had a really big breakup with my partner who I was with in my 20s. And, it was one of those breakups where I just fell into a hole, moved back in with my mum, left my job. I was really depressed, actually. And I just said, I'm just going to stop for a year. I'm just going to stop. I didn't work. I just stopped. Everything just stopped. And I think that for me was this incredible watershed moment, would that be the word, in my life, because my whole life had been about doing and searching and grasping, and then to find an identity, actually, like, who am I? And then to just stop for a year and be like, I have no idea, but I just have to stop this. That took a lot of nerve holding. And I was, incredibly fortunate that my mum was an incredible woman and kind of took me in. But to stay with that long enough until the next step appeared was one of the most challenging times of my life. But the best, because it took me in a different direction of really realizing sometimes you just have to stop. You can't create everything, you just have to receive somehow.
Just taking a moment to receive with you. I feel like I just want to know more about your story. That sounds like the watershed moment as you're describing it. What was the next step that was given to you?
So my mum was a psychotherapist, and then when my mum and my dad got divorced about 12 years ago, she got really into mindfulness for herself to be able to deal with it. So she said to me, go on this 8-week mindfulness course, like just go see what happens, go on it. She was then a mindfulness teacher by then. And I went on this 8-week mindfulness course. I'd never done anything. I'd had kind of spiritual practice in my life because my mum's Indian, my granny's was kind of a mystic in India, but I hadn't really embraced it. So I did this 8-week mindfulness course, and it really just blew my mind and heart open. And then I went on this kind of big journey of mindfulness and compassion and doing these courses. And then I went and spent some time out in South America studying plant medicines with a group of shamans, and I really dived into spirituality for the first time in any meaningful way. And now I can, it's almost like, I don't know, it was like a before spirituality, after spirituality, like a BC AD situation. Now I can't really imagine what life was like before embracing that side of life. And then I trained to be a meditation teacher, and then kind of, everything kind of opened up for me, I think, after that. And I had this foundational strength, I suppose, that I never had access. Well, that was in me, but I just didn't have access to before. So that's kind of that part of the story. And then I suppose where I got to where I am now is over the next few years, I was able to bring those two parts together in a way that I didn't think was possible. So I trained as a coach, as an integral coach, and I was teaching meditation, and then I started going back in to companies and doing some work, and all eventually kind of followed the breadcrumbs to now where me and my partner run our own consultancy, and we do consultancy with mainly tech companies because that's where we've worked with around conscious leadership and diversity and inclusion, and we call what we do helping companies scale with soul. So very similar energy actually to what you put out, which I absolutely love. And I was like, oh wow, these two can coexist. And then suddenly I was like, I don't have to tear myself apart. I can just be.
It's so, I feel there's a resonance with everything you're saying. And at the same time, this sense of even bigger than the two of us, this rising tide. I'm genuinely curious if 50 years ago, the older generation was actually having conversations like this. I just wasn't there to witness it. Or if in fact I'm right, the trend is changing. It really feels like 50 years ago, these things were separated in the cultural consciousness. Business was business. Spiritual life was frankly like religious life for the most part, or you were a weird hippie, but they were separate. Nobody was talking about them together, and plant medicine over maybe in a third bucket, whatever. Now, all of a sudden, I feel like everywhere, the conversation has become like, but not necessarily how do we integrate these things, but just naturally these things are touching each other. And we're researching what happens at those intersections or at those meeting points. And what happens there is so much better for human beings than this polarity of separation. Very, very potent hearing you talk about it, feeling you talk about it.
Yeah. I loved what you said there as well about researching what happens at the intersections, because there's so much beauty, isn't there, at the intersections of seemingly incongruous things. And then also to what you were saying about, you know, it just kind of naturally happened. I feel like that is such an important energy to embrace, because same how in our lives, if we're always pushing and striving, it can feel really painful. But if we can release just a little bit and see what unfolds, I think it's the same in the common cultural consciousness and in a lot of the work I do around race. Some of the conversations that I'm really bringing in are, I mean, a lot of people are saying, I didn't know this before, you know, this is so bad. And I'm saying, well, things evolve at the time that they evolve. And whilst I understand and I honor that there are going to be feelings of guilt and shame, really, in 100 years, we'll look back at where we've got to now and we'll be like, well, that was pretty, not very progressive. But we have to be okay with the fact that things happen at the time that they're meant to.
It's interesting because this particular principle I would love to just kind of lean into with you more, because I have my own cognitive dissonance and questions about it. Actually interesting, like hearing you, I'm like, oh yeah, I trained also to be a meditation teacher. That was a huge part of what got me here. I like that. Oh yeah. Oh, how many of us have done that? It's very cool. At that time in my life, I was so into just like full acceptance. That's what I was practicing. That's what I was learning. And at the time, that counterbalance, or that activity, that practice, was a counterbalance to my previous mentality, which was quite attached to a certain progression of things. So I'm now thinking about your swinging back and forth. I went back to that extreme. And in the last 5 years or so of being in business, my relationship with time has shifted. And it's not that it's like, at least intellectually, I still know the truth of the spiritual teaching that you're referencing, that it does no good to fight reality. It does no good to fight, like, here we are, this is the moment, what's happening is what's happening. Our resistance to that doesn't change it. So I have that intellectual understanding. And at the same time, I have discovered in myself, for sure, and in my communities, a toleration that hides underneath that belief system, that allows things to continue on when they don't have to. And whether it's poverty or scarcity or racism. And so I'm in negotiation in this moment, like in exactly right now, in terms of, okay, but what's the relation, like how much do I accept versus engage with participating in the change? And so I'd love to hear you speak to that, and how you support people with that, how you navigate that for yourself. I'm bringing you in right now as a spiritual expert and as an expert on culture change.
You know, as you were saying all of that, I was thinking I'm also in that same question, and probably would sense in myself that I would lean too much towards the spiritual principle of acceptance and allowance for all sorts of personal reasons, like being a person who doesn't enjoy, who is resistant to conflict, actually being in my own personal situation, feeling pretty like good and feeling like I've had a good-ish deal. So there's all of that stuff going on that makes me aware of how I can lean too much towards that side. So with that as a framing, I think it's really difficult, isn't it? We have to work out where that balance is. And I think probably in myself as a teacher, what I've come to settle within myself is that there will be many voices and that we need all the different voices. And somewhere between all the different voices, balance will be found. And so in myself, when I started writing and teaching about anti-racism and racial healing, really a lot of the place I was speaking from was like a foundationally spiritual place, which is that, yes, there is anger and yes, there is rage, and this needs to be held and expressed, but it's a stage in the healing process. It's not the end destination.
Mm-hmm.
Very different to what some incredible anti-racist teachers who will say, we need anger to continue fueling the movement. Whereas what I would say, anger is like a purging, and then we have to get to love. So I see that they're very different, and I suppose my perspective is that there has to be truth in all of them, that it's not an either or, but in some ways all of us represent like polarities, and that we kind of need to occupy the position that feels right for us, rather than be like, okay, I probably need to move a bit over a bit to this side. Oh no, maybe this to this side. Like, we are a collective, and therefore we can all be in different positions rather than everyone having to be perfectly balanced, if that makes sense. And I had a real epiphany actually. I was living in a monastery for about a month a few years ago, and I kept thinking, like, surely not everyone can live like this. And then I realized, well, these nuns and these monks, they're like the end point of peace. They represent the purest form of peaceful living. But that doesn't mean we're all supposed to live like that. They're just the polarity. And so that's kind of where I orient from now, is like, I know that in my heart and soul, the truth for me is that love and compassion is the foundation. But in someone else's heart and soul, it might be that anger and rage is the fuel of change. And that's equally true. We both need to be in our positions wholeheartedly.
It's very emotional for me hearing you speak about this. I think I'm aware also of the theme that I feel like is happening even with the way that you're moving your hands, of your own life sort of bouncing back and forth, trying to be one thing, trying to figure out what the one thing to be was, and then the full welcoming of yourself in recognizing that you can't, that there is like a container for all of those parts of you, and that complexity is the truth of you. That it isn't just one thing, and that the ease that you found and the success that you found and the integration that you found on a personal level in welcoming all parts of yourself is a reference or a metaphor for what the collective needs, what's possible for the collective. I think there's something emotional for me about that, perhaps because my parents also divorced. So there's like this part of me that just wants us all to always be together, you know? So like when I listen to you, I'm like, yeah, let's all be together. That's a core part of me. I think it's also, you know, the Democratic National Convention is on right now. And so I've been listening to both all these Democratic leaders here advocating for a new president, and also to some extent the right response to the convention. And what you're describing is, in my experience, the difference between the two kind of sides. It's like the Democrats at this juncture in the moment are calling on Republicans to support Joe Biden and speak about a unification of being willing to collaborate across difference, where Trump's camp is much more about there's one truth and this is it, and I'm going to fight for it. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm both aware of my own preference and why I have the politics that I have, whatever, but also how challenging it is for me, even with all the work that I've done, to really welcome Trump and his perspective. Or I also watched Chelsea Handler's documentary on white privilege that was released, I think it was released actually in the winter on Netflix. Similar, just like the amount of ignorance, the amount of harmful ignorance. It's hard for me as I listen to you, even though I want this unification, to say yes to all those parts There's so many parts that I'm like, yeah, yes, but not that one. Like I can say yes to a lot of things, but I don't know about that one. So there's like a fussiness in me in allowing myself to really go to the full extreme of what you're talking about.
And in some many ways, even I, in this belief system, I'm kind of in the same position, because I'm saying, well, really all perspectives are welcome, except for the perspective that not all perspectives are welcome.
Yeah.
There's always I think there is always a point where there's an intolerance within us. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, it's a human thing.
Yeah.
It is. And actually, as I hear you say that, immediately I feel like, okay, actually that allows me to connect more with the closed-minded perspective, because it's like, yeah, I'm closed-minded too sometimes.
Yeah.
Like we all have that part of us.
Yeah.
And I bet even the nuns and the monks at the monastery, like if we spent enough time with them, we could even that. It's like, this is what it is to be human. We have our own edges, all of us.
Yeah, they're probably sitting in meditation. Why is this person breathing so loudly? And that's beautiful. I mean, I love embracing flaws. And I actually had this amazing experience. I've been meaning to record an Instagram video about it, because especially on my Instagram, I speak a lot about love and compassion, and people often message me and say, like, how can you be in that place all the time? I'm always saying, like, I'm really not. But I had this amazing example this week where I really wasn't, and I want to share it with all the people who follow me, because I don't know if you have this in the States, but when you rent somewhere, you put down a deposit, and then at the end, like a security deposit, at the end, you're meant to get back most of it unless you trash the flat. My old landlord basically tried to kind of get money out of me unfairly. And when I got the email from her, I didn't even take a moment to be like, okay, well, maybe let me consider this reasonably, or maybe she's hurting. I just went from 0 to a million. I was like, how dare you? Rah, 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 rah. I was so angry. And it just turned into this like amazingly bitter war. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame through it, because of this kind of conception of myself as someone who's very patient. And then after like a week, I was like, can I swear on this? Can I?
Absolutely. Yep.
Fuck that! This woman's trying to exploit me out of money, and I thought, yeah, I got really angry, and that's cool. So, but it's great sometimes to see yourself totally opposite to how you actually conceive yourself, and then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm superhuman as well.
Yes.
Superhuman.
Exactly. Well, and I love that you just said that, because it just feels, again, incredibly compassionate, incredibly loving to let superhuman mean superhuman in exactly the way that you just said. This story of your anger with your old landlord also reminded me of I recently interviewed Sharon Salzberg for this series.
Oh, wow. I love her.
She's very lovable. That woman, like, talk about love and compassion. I mean, she is so thorough in the pervasiveness of her loving and compassionate energy. And I was sort of, not really, like, intellectually, if I really look at it, not really surprised, but there was some part of my being that was kind of shocked by how very clear her boundaries are. And very, like, I know intellectually that boundaries are loving and compassionate, but there is still, I think, in our day-to-day experience, this sort of toleration of codependency and niceness under the guise of spiritual love and compassion, but that's actually not. It's just a cover for something else. And she has none of that. I mean, she's like, you know, this is what we needed to make this decision. And so it came up around who was the person to read her books for Audible. Like that she was just like, no, for sure, it's me. And that her agent or the publisher or somebody else was like, no, we need an actress who's going to do this. And Sharon was like, well, okay, let's consider it. Has she done any meditation? Like, does she have any meditation experience? Because this is a book full of meditations. So she's going to need to have that experience in order to read the book. This is not a novel. And it was so enriching, satisfying, liberating to hear her be in her, like her love and compassion is nonstop throughout that conversation. And I think we just don't have that many examples. And that's the truth. I think that's where the spiritual misunderstanding or misconception of love and compassion as like never angry or never having boundaries that we fortify just comes from a lack of culture of that example. So it was really, really fun to hear her and feel her articulate that and still feel the love and compassion with that. And I just felt exactly the same thing from you. It's very, very nourishing for the community. I think I'm excited for you to tell this story on Instagram too.
Yeah, I can't wait to respond to her podcast.
Yeah. It was, she's got a new book coming out in September, also speaking about social justice and meditation and mindfulness. Real change. Yeah. So I'm super excited for that and her influence directly and indirectly, I'm sure, on both our lives. So much of what we're doing here has been facilitated by her generation and what they brought. I'm super grateful.
Yeah.
How can we help you?
Oh, you have some really juicy questions. How can people help them? Let me think about this. I think the thing that I wish most for humanity, and myself included, is for us to be willing to embrace complexity and diligent about doing the personal and spiritual or developmental work that allows that to happen. I think for me, I mean, one of the biggest heartbreaks for me in our generation is this polarization that there is. I think because to my core value, connection is so important to me. And I feel really heartbroken that even in a incredible moment in time or movement like there has been about anti-racism, so much of it is characterized by this polarization that gets really personal and really dirty and really cruel, and we move away from the actual broader movement. And I think a lot of that is because we are unwilling to embrace complexity, and to really look in, like we've been speaking about, and see that we are complex beings, neither good nor bad, neither this nor that. So I think probably, and my life's work is really about how we can live together in harmony in all our diversity. And in order to do that, we need to be able to see that that's not simple, that the agenda for that isn't going to be everybody believing the same thing, or everybody just kind of getting with the program and understanding that this is the right way. But somehow we need to get to a level of consciousness that I don't think we're at, that I don't think I'm at, where we can understand that different and opposite perspectives can both be true and can live together. And I don't know how we do that because I don't think we're there, but I think that's the only way that we can live in harmony. That's how I think people can help me. That's what I care about most. Yeah. And I think a lot, probably another thing that feels very important to me is people seeing, to what we were speaking about whether like where is it on the scale of acceptance versus pushing for change. I think that it's both, but I do think adopting a more evolutionary perspective of change is really helpful. And I think about this a lot because I'm about to have my first baby in like 4 weeks. And so,
congratulations.
Thank you. Everything in my life has shifted from thinking that my lifetime is life to now thinking that his lifetime is actually life. And I got that again intellectually, but now to really think, wow, like this matters, like after I died matters, and there's still going to be change going on, and we need to do the work that is ours now to do, in the knowing that we're just a link in the chain, and that more will happen. And I think that that's really humbling for great social movements, because then we can really do the work that is called on now, whilst not thinking that everything has to be done immediately, because it can't. So I think that that's maybe where the acceptance is important to me. A kind of easing to say that doesn't mean we shouldn't be fighting for change. Absolutely we should. But in the knowing that we're just a link. It's going to go on after us. That's, I think, how people can help me.
So beautiful, so generous. I don't always cry during these interviews. It's pretty unusual, but today it's just like many times. I am so touched by you and your love and compassion and your transmission. I'm so grateful that I mean, this is one of those like strange ironies, you know, that if it's not to make it right or justified in any way, but just to know that I don't think that we would know each other, except that George Floyd was murdered and the movement changed directions and took over social media. And then I had this experience and went hunting and found you. And I'm super grateful for that. For you know, for there to be any good that comes of it is valuable to me. And I feel grateful to be a recipient of that good. I can't wait to like squeeze you. Like, I'm like, it's a good thing that you're in the UK, because otherwise I'd be running over, crawling into your lap and giving you the biggest hug that I can possibly get. Like, just have fallen, my heart is all over there.
Oh, me too. That's so lovely. Yeah. An energetic hug over the music.
Yeah. People can find you on Instagram, Holiday Phillips handle. 1 L in Holiday, 2 L's in Phillips.
Yeah.
That's helpful for me.
Yeah, that's the best place, and that's where I'm kind of always releasing things. I'm going to be off for like 3 months after the baby comes, so know that I'm still there and just being a mama. But that's where that will be my home when I come back.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. We will shower you with love and your whole family during this time of retreat. I'm super excited for that transformation. What a big deal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your heart with us, Holiday. I'm so grateful. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. Just take a moment right now and send Holiday and her family your blessings and love, your own welcoming of all parts of you, at least, and as many of the parts of the world as you can muster. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Everything you want is already here.